Hi everyone. Chapter 4 is important because it gives us information about what resources we can use in the pharmacy when we have questions about drugs. Most of this information is not used by pharmacy technicians, but it's used by pharmacists when they have questions about dosage forms, drug calculations, drugs from the same therapeutic class, etc. And even though as pharmacy technicians we don't use a lot of the information contained in this chapter, we need to know it for the PTCB exam. Every year, several new drugs are added to pharmacy shelves. And as a result, there are hundreds of new drug-related reports that are published annually. It can be difficult to keep on top of all this new information as it's released. So as a result, we need resources to help us find information about drugs when we need it. Pharmacy literature can be thought of as a pyramid that's divided into 3 sections. Primary literature includes original research reports that are produced by pharmaceutical companies when they develop new drugs, and they're published in scientific journals. This type of information is very detailed and it's very difficult to understand. But it provides direct access to the most current information about a drug. So the next type of literature that we have is called secondary literature, and it's basically just a summary of the very difficult and hard to understand primary literature. And there are 2 services that create these summaries for us. The first is called an abstracting service, and it basically summarizes the information, as I said, from primary literature sources. And an indexing service really just provides the bibliographic citation from the original source of material. So it basically just tells you the company and where it was published and where you can access the original report if you wanted to. The easiest way to get to this secondary literature that summarizes the hard-to-read primary reports is by going to database searches. For instance, in PubMed is a good example. So the next type of literature is the one we are most concerned with as pharmacy technicians, and that's called tertiary literature. That includes textbooks, like the textbook you're using for your class, drug monographs, standard reference books, and review articles. Tertiary literature is the most commonly used reference in a real pharmacy setting, and that's because it's easy and convenient to use. Unfortunately, however, there is not one single lone tertiary book that tells us everything we need to know about drugs or pharmacy. So we're going to learn about several of these tertiary literature sources that are often found in a pharmacy setting. But again, unfortunately, there isn't just one we can refer to whenever we have a question about drugs. The drawback with tertiary literature sources is sometimes they are published more than a year after the original literature was created by a pharmaceutical company. So it may no longer be current, it might not be the most up-to-date, but it is the most convenient. So in a nutshell, to summarize, primary literature are the original research reports that you'll find in scientific journals, many of them published directly by the pharmaceutical company that created the drug. Secondary literature will actually summarize that information, make it a little bit easier to understand and access. And tertiary literature is the easiest and most common type of reference that we use in the pharmacy. Now take a moment and answer question number 1 on the Chapter 4 handout that accompanies this lecture. So let's talk about some of these reference books that we have to be familiar with in the pharmacy. Surprisingly, there is no federal law that requires pharmacies to keep on their shelves a reference book to inform them about drugs. Kind of surprising. But most pharmacies, they do maintain reference materials, and some of them we've already learned about. For instance, the safety data sheets that are required by OSHA. Safety data sheets can be obtained by the manufacturer directly, or you can actually get them from your local OSHA office, or you can get them online at USP SDS, which stands for Safety Data Sheets, online. Another type of reference material that we have in the pharmacy are patient package inserts and medication guides. These are all forms of tertiary literature. Quiz yourself. Do you remember what these reference materials are? So in addition to the reference materials I just mentioned, some additional tertiary literature resources are kept on pharmacy shelves, and because we'll be working in a pharmacy, we need to be familiar with these. In addition, many of them are on the PTCB exam. So I will go over each of these with you, and I'll try and highlight why each one is important. The Drug Facts and Comparisons is the most common reference book that's used by pharmacists in the community pharmacy setting. That's because it contains drug descriptions, it has color pictures of each drug, it has dosage calculations that help the pharmacist when he's dealing with brand and generic drugs. It lists drug interactions for each medication. And also importantly, a pharmacist can use this to compare medications in the same therapeutic class. Therapeutic class just means that drugs are grouped together according to the disease that they help to prevent and treat. So for example, a pharmacist can refer to Drug Facts and Comparison to compare two beta blockers, metoprolol and atenolol. The Drug Facts and Comparisons, it has an edition that comes in a loose leaf binder so you can insert the pages. So as there's monthly updates, it's easily updatable. And again, the most common reference book in a pharmacy setting. So in a nutshell, the Drug Facts and Comparisons is used for drug descriptions, drug identification with handy pictures of what each pill looks like. It gives dosage calculations, it lists drug interactions, and it also helps pharmacists find drugs in the same therapeutic class. The American Drug Index is published by Drug Facts and Comparisons, but basically it's kind of like the index you find at the back of your textbook. It's just a really handy-dandy, quick way to find brand and generic names. It basically just is an index of the larger Drug Facts and Comparisons book. The Red Book is also used in community pharmacies, and this is the book we go to when it has anything to do with the price of a drug. So the Red Book has to do with finding out price information for a drug, and that includes drug costs for prescriptions. If you want to know the average wholesale price of a prescription, average wholesale price is abbreviated as AWP. Or if you want to know the retail prices for over-the-counter products. Notice all these words: pricing, cost, AWP, all those have to do with money. So the Red Book is anything that has to do with prices for drugs. We use this book when we bill insurance companies when a patient gets their prescription filled. The reason we use this book is it lists the NDC number of all FDA-approved drugs. And the NDC number is the number we need to use to bill the insurance company. And we have that word bill. Bill has to do, again, with money. So anything to do with money and pricing comes from the Red Book. So in addition, the Red Book contains a directory of all manufacturers and wholesales and insurance companies. It gives contact information for these companies, their address, their phone number. So in a nutshell, the Red Book is used for pricing information on prescription drugs. It's used for average wholesale price for prescriptions. We use it for the suggested retail price for over-the-counter drugs. We use it if we just really quick want to know the NDC number of a drug, and we can also use it for contact information for manufacturer address and phone numbers. The physician's desk reference is found in most doctor's offices, and as we learned last week, it's mostly made up of package inserts or monographs that are created by pharmaceutical manufacturers. Now keep in mind, not every drug is included in the PDR. Manufacturers pay to have their drug information included in this reference book, so not every drug ever made will be found in here. It's really easy for doctors to use this reference book. It has an index of brand and generic drug names and color photos of all of the drugs that are included. Because it is very similar to the package insert or the monograph, it contains much of the same information that's found on a monograph. Information about drug usage, warnings, contraindications, and interactions. So the physician's desk reference is found in a provider's office. It is comprised of the package inserts and monographs that are published by a pharmaceutical company. It includes the drug usages, warnings, interactions, and contraindications of the drugs. It's easy to use with its index of brand and generic drug names and the full-size color photos of the drugs that are included. It basically gives FDA regulation information on prescription drugs. The Orange Book is actually a nickname for the FDA's Approved Drug Products with Therapeutic Equivalence Evaluations. Last week we talked about therapeutic equivalence. This is the reference book that you use to find out if two drugs are therapeutically equivalent. We call it the Orange Book for obvious reasons because the cover is orange. So we use the Orange Book, as I said, to determine the therapeutic equivalence of a brand and generic drug. And just as a friendly reminder, therapeutic equivalence means the body's use of the drug is the same. And how do we know it's the same? Because the rate and the extent of absorption into the bloodstream is the same. So when the rate and the extent of the drug being absorbed into the bloodstream is the same, we say two drugs are equivalent to each other. Now just a little note, therapeutic equivalence is different than therapeutic class of a drug. A drug class simply just groups drugs together that treat the same disease. So if you want to know about the therapeutic class of a drug, you would go back to that very first reference book I talked about, which was Drug Facts and Comparisons. The Orange Book helps us determine if two drugs are therapeutically equivalent by using a special coding system. Each drug listed in the Orange Book has a code next to its name that consists of two letters. If the code begins with the letter A, it means the drug is therapeutically equivalent. If the code begins with the letter B, it means the drug is not equivalent. Here's an example of a page from the Orange Book. As you can see, there is a column listed TE code. TE stands for therapeutically equivalent. Each drug has a code next to its name. As you can see, there are two letters in that code. The first letter tells us if it's an A equivalent or a B not equivalent. The second letter gives us information about the route of administration or the formulation. So here's a question. Are these drugs in this column, the drugs that are coded AB, are these considered therapeutically equivalent? The answer is yes. Each of these codes start with the letter A. That's the only letter we're interested in, the first letter of the code. If it's an A, the drug is equivalent. If it's a B, it's non-equivalent. In this case, all of these start with the letter A. All of these drugs are therapeutically equivalent. So in a nutshell, the Orange Book tells us the therapeutic equivalents of brand and generic drugs. Now take a moment and see if you can answer question numbers 2 through 9 on your Chapter 4 handout. We have a few more tertiary literature resources that we need to be familiar with in the pharmacy. And again, I'll kind of pinpoint what each one of these is used for. The AHFS Drug Information Guide is used to investigate off-label medication indications. Off-label means the medication is being used in a manner not specified in the FDA's approved packaging label or insert. In other words, a drug was developed to treat a certain disease state, but we found out it also works to help other ailments. For instance, Corgard, that's a cardiovascular beta blocker, but it can also be used to effectively treat migraines. As a reminder, the AHFS Drug Information Guide is used for off-label indications, and it also contains yearly monograph updates. The Handbook on Injectable Drugs is pretty self-explanatory. It's just used as a reference for injectable drug preparation, storage, administration, and stability questions. In addition, there's a reference book called The King Guide to Parenteral Admixtures. The word parenteral usually means medicine that's given by injection. So this handbook is also a reference for information on injectable drug compatibility and stability. The Martindale is a reference book we use when we want information on foreign drugs. The USP-NF. NF stands for National Formulary. These books contain all of the FDA standards for drugs that are manufactured, marketed, and sold in the United States. It contains many volumes, and each volume contains many chapters. Any standards that are listed in Chapter 1 through 999 are enforceable by FDA law. They're not just suggestions about the quality or standards of the drugs. They are requirements for drugs to meet FDA approval, and again, enforceable by law. These reference books also include a national formulary for excipients that are approved for use in the United States. An excipient is just an inactive ingredient that's added to a drug, maybe as a preservative or as a filler. But any excipient approved by the FDA is included in this national formulary. Also published by USP is the Compounding Compendium. This just includes the chapters that have to do with compounding from all of those books listed up above. It's basically just a supplement. In other words, if I'm going to be compounding a medicine, that means making a medicine from scratch. Instead of having to look through all those volumes in the picture above, I can just refer to this handy supplement because it contains the 5 chapters from the USP-NF that focus strictly on compounding of drugs. Inside of this handy-dandy supplement are Chapters 795, 797, and Chapter 800. These are very important chapters that you have to know if you're going to be making medicine from scratch. Here's a quick question. Do you think Chapters 795, 797, and Chapter 800 are enforceable by law? The answer is yes. These are chapters that are between the numbers 1 and 999. So again, what's listed in this compendium are not just suggestions. These are rules we have to follow by the FDA to make sure we are compounding medication that is safe for use. And the final 2 reference books are the Merck Index. This is easy to remember. We refer to this when we want to know anything about the chemical attributes of a drug. For instance, the solubility of a drug, what makes a drug dissolve. Anything that has to do with the chemical attributes of a drug, we refer to the Merck Index. The Remington is the most comprehensive text that covers all aspects of pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences. So it's your go-to book when you want to research anything to do with pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences. It's widely used by compounding pharmacists as well. Now take a moment to quiz yourself and answer questions 10 through 12 on your handout. Your textbook also mentions other resources for information. Those include professional practice journals and also trade journals as well. In addition, newsletters and textbooks are a good source of information, similar to the textbook that you use for this class. Of course, the internet is a great resource for information as well. Medical information is easily accessible on the internet. And there are two key websites that you should know. The first is Medscape, and this is a great resource tool for healthcare professionals. It includes databases on drugs and OTC medications and information about herbal supplements as well. For patients, a user-friendly website is Medline Plus. It includes a medical dictionary, information about their meds, prescription and OTC, and it even has videos and interactive games and quizzes. So again, Medscape is really geared more toward the healthcare professional, whereas Medline Plus is an easy-to-use, friendly version for patients. Medical mobile apps make medical information easily accessible on a handheld mobile device. These are abbreviated as MMAs. They help healthcare professionals to access medication databases. They can even perform pharmaceutical calculations, assist with diagnosis and treatment, and even remotely monitor patients. However, something to keep in mind, many of these apps are developed by not only medical professionals, but non-medical individuals as well. And that means some information may be inaccurate, and you must always verify information that you are getting from these sources. The Institute for Safe Medicine Practices is a great resource for anything to do with medication safety. ISMP is actually a nonprofit organization, and their sole purpose is to help reduce medication errors. They publish newsletters and safety lists to help us make sure we are choosing the right medication when we are filling a script. One of their best-known publications is the Do Not Use list of error-prone abbreviations. When doctors write a script, they often use SIG codes that are abbreviations to tell us how to fill a prescription. However, ISMP has realized that certain abbreviations often cause confusion, and so they publish this list for doctors to try and encourage them to avoid using those error-prone abbreviations. In addition, ISMP, they publish a list of look-alike drug names and sound-alike drug names that also are highly prone to confusion. And they indicate which drugs you should be using tall man lettering in order to more readily distinguish between them so you don't choose the wrong drug. And ISMP publishes a newsletter called the Medication Safety Alert to draw our attention to any updates or alerts that we should be aware of. Your textbook also includes information about the PTCE exam, which is given by the PTCB board. The certification exam is 120 minutes long and is administered in a proctored computerized environment. The exam contains 90 multiple-choice questions. You must score 1,400 out of 1,600 points possible in order to pass the exam. That's equivalent to an 87.5% in order to pass. Certified pharmacy technicians must renew their PTCB certification every 2 years, and this is done through continuing education. We must complete 20 contact hours of continuing ed every 2 years, and this is done by completing modules online. Out of the 20 hours, one of them must be focused on pharmacy law and one must be focused on patient safety. Currently, 5 of the 20 hours are given to you for free just by working in a pharmacy. So if you're employed in a pharmacy, your pharmacist just has to sign off that he supervises you and he'll list what your current duties are, and you'll get 5 of the 20 hours for free. However, this option will be expiring in the year 2018. You will not get free hours just from working in a pharmacy. Now take a moment to answer question numbers 13 through 16 on your Chapter 4 handout. We've covered a lot of information about the reference materials we use in the pharmacy, and it's important that you're knowledgeable about these. I suggest you complete the review section in your textbook on pages 108 through 111. In addition, I would get extra practice in your gray workbook on pages 36 through 39. 10% of the PTCB exam consists of questions that are related to pharmacy information. This is the material that comes from Chapter 4 that we just reviewed. Quiz yourself on it. Make sure that you know the material.